Hello there. It's been a minute since I made a build video, but most of the bugs from DLC 3 seem to have been fixed now, so I can finally get back to it. Today I've got something pretty simple, no crazy interactions or weird shenanigans. It's just a straight up gun build using the new Warden archetype for some extra defenses to make us a little more well-rounded. I've got two versions to show, so let's get into it. For the archetypes, we're going to stay on the same ones for both versions of this build. We're on Hunter Prime for the Dead to Rights Prime perk, which is going to give us permanent uptime on our Hunter's Mark in boss fights. Hunter's Focus will give you more damage, but I tend to prefer Hunter's Mark for its ease of use, and the wall hacks are also very nice in boss rush for like tracking down the aberration if it spawns somewhere weird. And this is really what the build is designed for, primarily, is boss rush. So our second archetype is the Warden, and really you can take whichever drone you like the most. Personally, I'm going to stick with the combat drone for some more damage and help while mobbing, but really any of them are going to work here. The shield drone is going to give you 10% DR, which is definitely the best defensive passive, and the heal drone has a better energy economy, but a fairly useless passive in extra relic use speed. So for this first version, we're using the plasma cutter as our main weapon. We take the Zero Divide amulet since the plasma cutter chews through ammo, and we're also building some crit to boost our damage with the 1000 Cuts mutator, Akari Warband, and probability cord. Leaking Gemstone is going to help keep plasma cutter's mod going in boss fights, and Ring of the Robust is just a good ring in terms of value just for defensive stats. You can go for even more damage here if you want with something like more crit from Braided Thorns, but Boss Rush has really made me value this type of Generalist build more than the full DPS Glass Cannon builds I enjoyed before the mode came out. For our other weapons, the melee doesn't really matter here. I've just got a Harvester's Scythe with Shocker because it looks cool. And our handgun is Enigma to give our primarily single target build some AoE for mobbing, and we're actually using a new tool, well, not a new tool, but one that I've never really found useful before this, which is the Spirit Healer Mutator. This is going to heal you for 1.8% max HP per second with Enigma's mod cost every time you cast the mod, allowing you to get the mobbing power of Enigma while also getting like the sustain you get from something like Healing Shot. You can also stack this heal multiple times, so you can restore a lot of health very quickly if necessary. I've just got Tranquil Heart for the relic because I like the passive healing, but as usual you can take really whatever you want. For our traits, we're going into Fortify and Vigor for more bulk and comfort, and overall we're sitting at a comfy 50% DR, and then if we pull out the drone to get some bulwark, we're sitting at almost 54% DR with a fair amount of health. Footwork is always good on gun builds, especially when we're going to be sitting in ADS and unloading most of the time, like with Plasma Cutter. Expertise lets us use Hunter's Mark while mobbing and speeds up the recharge rate of the Warden drone energy. And Chakra keeps the Plasma Cutter's mod going on longer. I've got Swiftness and Untouchable as my comfort traits, but feel free to move those points wherever you want if you don't care for the extra move speed or iframes. The new Insight trait is amazing, and it ends up being more consistent than Spirit, I found, so definitely throw any extra points in there. Finally, for the Relic Fragments and the Prism, you're always going to take range crit chance, range crit damage, and then your final fragment can either be fire rate, weak spot damage, or just more health. I tend to prefer fire rate on this setup, but it's really up to you. For the Prism, we're primarily a range build. and I'm just using my generic Hugs Prism here. If I was going to roll a Prism specifically for this build, I would go for range crit as the single fragment, gunfighter, and meta like I have here, but I would not take munitions because we're going to take Zero Divide, and instead I would go for something like maybe Hulk or Tank, just some more survivability because we don't really need ammo reserves. And then for the legendary, Sharpshooter, of course, is going to be the best damage increase, but there are a couple other options that are going to work also very well with this build. The first one is Boundless Energy for infinite Nerudian energy, which is going to let you keep your shield drone out forever. It's really best used with the shield drone because the main downside to that is its relatively poor energy economy, and Boundless Energy just erases that, and it just gives you constant shields forever, which is an insane amount of survivability and is quite strong. You'll also have a good time with Immovable, which is going to be permanently active because Warden's Safeguard team perk is going to give you Bulwark all the time to activate it. And then, of course, Jack of all trades is never terrible. This build is just going to play like any other range build, just with some extra defensive capabilities thanks to Warden. Enigma is going to melt through the mobbing sections for boss rush, and Plasma Cutter is still just a monster of a weapon for bossing. This is just very simple, straightforward, and effective. Now we can talk about the second version of this build, though, which is using some shiny new toys. Alright, for the second version of this build, we're using the new Genesis bow. Shocker, I know, the two best ranged weapons in the game are the best choices here. You've probably seen a bunch of videos on this, maybe you've seen some speed kills, but yeah, this weapon is just an absolute beast, especially when we've got the Mega Drive mod active. We're still keeping Ring of the Robust and Akari Warband here, but I've gone for Archer's Crest since we're now using a bow, and it being a single shot weapon also lets us get infinite ammo from the new Infinity Pocket Ring. For the amulet, I've chosen to go light roll for the new 0 Hour amulet, since with the added defenses of Warden, we can stay at a pretty comfortable amount of survivability while becoming much more agile and getting the full damage bonus from 0 Hour. For your skills, you can pick any of the 3 hunter skills with this build. Personally, I still value the wall hacks, but Hunter's Focus is going to give you more damage, and then Hunter's Shroud plays very nice with bow builds. But yeah, take your pick there. Your choice of the Warden drone is a bit more limited though, and generally you're going to want to take the combat drone in most cases, which I'll come back to when I go over the ideal Prism setup. So for our weapons, we've obviously got Genesis with Supercharger, and then the rest of the weapons are the same as the Plasma Cutter setup. For our traits, we don't really need Flashcaster anymore, since Mega Drive doesn't have an animation that locks you out of doing stuff, unlike Heatsink. These points have gone into Strongback to let me wear 40 weight of armor while still light rolling for 0 Hour, and overall, with the Warden drone out, we're sitting at 50% DR with the same amount of health as the Plasma Cutter build. So basically we have almost as much bulk as the Plasma Cutter build while light rolling. The last few points can go really wherever you want. Take your pick between Spirit and Insight and any other traits you're eyeing. Personally, I found that Spirit is a little more reliable than Insight this time around. For the fragments, this time they're pretty set in stone. You're always going to take range crit, crit damage, and firearm charge time. On the Prism, ideally you would have charge time as the single fragment here, with the important fusions being meta and munitions. The extra charge time lets you hit 75% decreased charge time without combat drone, with the drone's buff pushing you above 80%, which is the cap. If you don't have the charge time fragment on your Prism like I do, you're basically forced to take Combat Drone, otherwise Genesis is just going to feel sluggish. On both of these builds, there's no reason to not take advantage of consumables as well, especially in Boss Rush. They're very cheap, very powerful, and in the case of Fairy Needles and Ghoul Serum, they'll usually last you for an entire fight. I always keep Bloodroot, Fairy Needle, and Ghoul Serum on hand, and that final consumable can either be Light Extract for a 30 seconds haste buff, or Brightstone for 10% increased multiplicative damage, really whatever you're feeling. Overall though, both of these builds are very strong and are going to do very well against pretty much anything you'll encounter in Boss Rush. You've got pretty high damage, good survivability, and both of these builds are just overall very comfy to play. I'll be cooking up some more interesting builds with some more interesting interactions soon, but I wanted to start with something simple that also involves the new archetype. Try it out, see how it feels, and enjoy.